What we doing? So, talking today about pricing. This is the last installment of my reseller economics because we've already done in the first part. We talked about getting into reselling, things you're interested in. The second part was about sourcing, and now pricing. Of course, is the like the cousin of sourcing. If you source responsibly, meaning you get items at a low enough price and items that will sell, it gives you flexibility in pricing, and you can do a few of the things I'm going to talk about to either maximize profit or to move items quickly. So when you talk about pricing on eBay, which is what I do, you have the absolute bottom rung of what you can sell something for. And this is items that are larger than trading cards, but smaller than 5 ounces and smaller in dimension than, say, a regular shipping envelope. That bottom rung is $7. When you take into account the shipping cost and the fees, if you sell an item for $7, you'll make about $1 on it, depending on if you paid anything to source it, say. I try to do $8 minimum because that makes me about $3 on most of the items that I sell, and I can live with that. Really, part of pricing is understanding that if you price items low, they will tend to move faster, and you get that money back into your coffers so you could buy more items or you could invest it. Pricing items high means they're going to sit around longer, but you're going to make more money on it. That's really the two schools of thought. And these schools of thought really depend on what you're getting into this for. If you want to do a full-time career out of this and you have tons of space, you can price items at really the max concept that they could go for, the perception of value. And you're going to have a lot of stuff, and you're going to have to sort through stuff to move it, but you're going to get max value on everything you pick up. If you have limited space and you're just doing this to flip some stuff and make pocket money, you can price it lower. And when we source responsibly and have that flexibility, we can make that decision. So the concept of buy low, sell high, that's really an economic standard. But again, we're not dealing in food and things people need to live and to function. If you're doing reselling, you're mostly just dealing in fun items, things that people have a desire for but not a need for. And I found the idea was when I did buy low, sell high, I found I was adding a lot of inventory, and that's fine. You want inventory. But I was adding, and stuff wasn't leaving as quick as I thought. And the space I have to store things was starting to get, a bit cluttered. So I started thinking about how I was pricing. And what I was doing is I was pricing at what something historically sold for. And sometimes a few dollars more if I thought mine was nicer. I would look at what something had sold at previously and I'd be like, my paint isn't as chipped. I'm going to add $2 to that. And that's okay if you have space, but I found I was sitting on things longer than I wanted to. So what I started doing was buy low, sell low. I sourced more intelligently, bought items that were more likely to be sold, and I bought them at cheaper prices when I could so that I could be much less than other people selling items. So something people get stuck on reselling is there's so many of these for sale. That's really a secondary condition. The first thing that you look at when you're sourcing is, do these sell? Are enough of them selling where it's worth picking this up? Am I going to move this eventually? Then you start looking at, well, how many are for sale and at what price are they for sale? And you're going to find there's a divide in that perception of value. So an item might sell routinely for $14. And then you look and there's 10,000 of them for sale and they're all 16 and up. That doesn't matter at that point. If you take one and you list it for 13, it's going to move. It's going to move before any of those 10,000 other items with condition and seller rating, in the back of your mind. You know, for apples to apples, if you have the same thing as those other items, yes, you could list it at the same and it's going to sit for a while and you'll make a little more money. But I found that if I priced it lower and moved it quickly, I was more happy. And then that amount of stuff I had shrunk down, and my sales went up, and I got my seller rating, and I got all the prestige isn't the word for it, but we'll go with it. The prestige on my account where I got multiple sales because I was moving stuff. And maybe if I'd hung on to it longer, I'd make a little more. But instead, I'm flipping that money. I'm putting it back in and getting better items. So when we look at that quantity, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't if items are moving. The idea is to be cheaper than even what they're selling for if possible. Sharp pricing can undercut any amount of inventory if that item is moving. So the next part of pricing is you have to make a decision on free shipping and build shipping. Again, this is eBay specific or other, Mercari, other setups where you're not doing in-person selling. So that perception of value people have is going to be incorporated into that shipping. If people are willing to spend $15 on it, on an item, paying $15 on that item with free shipping, or 10 and 5, it's all the same. You find that shipping matters geographically, and you got to look at where you live. I live in New England, so I have a broad amount of space between me and other parts of the country. And when you get outside of certain package sizes and certain weight limits, what might have, under 5 ounces from here to one state over might cost $3.80, but it might cost $4.40 to go to Washington State. If this item was larger, it might cost $10 to go one state over and like $25 to go all the way across the country, depending on those factors. So when pricing larger items, you have to look at your geography as well. You may find that a lot of the people selling that item that are asking for X amount of money are all lumped up into certain areas. And you may find, okay, so if I can even price higher than these people because anybody, on either side of the Mississippi is more apt to purchase from me because while the item might be $2 more, the shipping might be $5 less. It's that perception of value. It kind of doesn't matter to people. Some people, as a rule, won't buy from you if it's not free shipping, but you got to do what's right for you. So the final part of this is in pricing is you can hold items long-term for value. So I deal with primarily used items, and I sell them at whatever I feel I can get from them quickly. I also source really high-end items new in box. And when we look at supply and demand, if you take an action figure from the 90s, the supply of that action figure is finite. There's never going to be more of it. Nobody's going to find a barge floating off the coast full of these things. So you might have 100 of them in active circulation. Over time, they get purchased and go into collections and they're no longer for sale. They get damaged, they get stolen, they get opened, and they're not in that condition any longer. So the sold number might be $30, for instance. You could feel okay selling it at $50 with the understanding it's not going to go right away, but there's something called a price floor. Because eventually the desire for that item is going to outstrip the supply of that item as they've dropped out of the pool, been purchased, been ruined, etc. So you can bring in stuff that you feel is going to be vintage and of value long term and price it in a way that you don't have any intention of selling it today. You have an intention of selling it for a lot of money in a year from now. And while you could flip it for $30 today, $50 in a year, that's not bad. And if have that balance, I have a balance of that. I have 2 dedicated bins to just that. And as those items go down over the years, and I might pick up some more stuff in that regard and get max value. And that's really what pricing is. Again, is Do you need this money today? What are you using this money for? What do you have the space for? And how do you want to conduct your business? And you got to find what works for you, economically and spatially, uh, relationship wise. If you have a shared living space, you might find that your significant other wants stuff gone, and or you might not. You might not have to worry about that. That's really all there is to pricing, is finding an amount you're happy with and going back to sourcing and sourcing intelligently, sourcing to sell things for a profit margin you're okay with putting your time into. And you do you do it the way you want to do it, and be happy with the results, and have your long-term goals. This is my retirement. I'm putting money into this now to retire, and when I do retire, this is going to be my full-time vocation as much as I want it to be. So that's it for this one, and our next lesson next week is going to be about board games, because there's a lot to it, and I think it's pretty interesting how board games work. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.